Namaste and good morning, everyone. Let's do some prayers before our talk. Om Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshwara, Guru Sakshat Parbrahma, Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Om Bhur Bhavaswaha, Tatsavitra Varenyam, Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi, Dhiyo Yo Nah Prachodayat, Asto Ma Sadgamya, Tamso Ma Jyotirgamya, Mrityurma Amritam Gamya. Om Sehna Bhavatu, Sehna Bhunaktu, Saviryam Karvavahi, Tejasvi Navadhitamastu, Ma Vidveshavahi. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. As you all know, according to the Sanatan Dharma and other religious traditions also, I'm sure they say the same thing, but since we learn from the Sanatan Dharma, we can talk about that more. So Sanatan Dharma teaches us that human beings can have two commendable aspirations. One is called Abhyudaya, that means worldly prosperity and well-being. And the other is called Nishraya, ultimate freedom, spiritual illumination. That's why the definition of dharma is Abhyudaya, Nishraya, Sadharma. So of these both, dharma is said to be the basis. Prosperity, the worldly prosperity that has not dharma as the basis, crumbles down sooner than even if there is an internal hemorrhage, actually, as they say. And of course, the spiritual illumination one cannot even think of except through being righteous. Further, it's taught in our scriptures that if abhyudaya or worldly prosperity is not directed and subordinated to and utilized for attaining nishraya, it becomes self-destructive. So we must clearly understand that from prosperity, illumination is not a logical development, but at the same time, the empty stomach is no good for religion. This is what Sanatan Dharma teaches. And one thing we all definitely want in life is success. What may be our undertaking? Whether in the direction of worldly prosperity or spiritual illumination. So that means in the spheres of secular or sacred. No one of us likes to fail. We all want to succeed. So success we all desire. And truly successful men are only a handful. Majority of the people attain moderate degree of success. And many more just fail. There could be various factors. When we look at the stories of the successful or the failure personalities. But in every single case, there will be one common factor involved. And that factor is willpower. So the degree of a person's success in life depends upon the degree of willpower he has attained. How to develop the willpower? That turns out to be the most important fundamental issue of everyone's life. In fact, it should be the part of our education from our childhood. We should train our children, grandchildren to develop the willpower. In Sanskrit, willpower is called Sankalp Shakti. Because without the Sankalp Shakti, no matter which area we are working on, the success is ineffective. But if unfortunately we have not learned how to develop willpower early in life, we should do so at any stage of life. Because self-improvement is almost impossible without the voluntary or involuntary exercise of the willpower. And given the willpower, we can bring about considerable changes in our individual and also collective lives. In fact, the hopeless situations can be turned around. There are so many examples we can see in our history, in every society. So if we study the lives of those persons who were once in very bad shape and afterwards were found to rise from the shambles in a very spectacular manner, we will discover that in every single case, it was their willpower that brought them towards their transformation. And that's how they rose. Sometimes it's a good idea to read about their life stories, learn from their lives. How could they rise high? They did not wilt away like buds before the full blossoming. In every single case, we'll see that. So given the willpower, a person makes everything out of nothing, as it were. And in the absence of the willpower, all the talents, qualities, and endowments, they can come to nothing. The question is how the will originates. In the Vedas, especially in the Taittiriya Upanishad, we studied it. In one of the mantra over there, the English translation is that this universe in truth in the beginning was nothing at all. There was no heaven, no earth, no atmosphere. This being that was solely non-being conceived a wish, may I be. This is the translation of that mantra. Whether you accept the Vedic teachings or not, one truth definitely comes out of it. That behind all creative efforts in all spheres of life is an act of will. And what is this will? Where does it originate from? Our rishis, they gave a definition of willpower. They say will is a compound of self and mind. By the word self is meant here the Atma, the soul of a person. Atma is beyond causation. It is undifferentiated consciousness. In that consciousness, there is no will. Because will presupposes a reaction to something external or other. So in undifferentiated consciousness, there is no such a thing. That's why we get confused sometimes. Why did God will? So though Atma is free in its pure essential nature, but when identified with the mind and body, it is in a state of bondage. So in other words, in that state, it's not free. This will is the first manifestation of the real self. When it got caught into the phenomena or Maya. So will. So it is a compound of Atma and mind. Mind is a subtle matter. Mind. That's why we call it a Suksham Sharir. So in the will, there are two strands. One of the spirit and the other of matter. A strand of light and a strand of darkness. In the ultimate analysis, this compound is bound to be unreal because it's based on the unreality of Maya. But as long as we are in the realm of Maya, that is to say, as long as we remain spiritually unillumined, it is very real for all practical purposes. And it moves things in the way which nothing else does in this world, except the powerful forces of the nature, the Prakriti. Imagine what was the face of this earth, or the face of this any country. And how did all those vast and stupendous changes were brought about by human will? All the actions we see in the world, all the movements and achievements are manifestations of a will of a human being. To be able to see each other on the screen, to be able to hear each other, to be able to live like no other generation before us could live, started from a will of a human being. So what we are proud of and what we deplore in human civilization, what amazes us in the spheres of science, really makes us speechless sometimes. Let us now understand this concept of willpower from a practical point of view as it affects our life. Because it's not only in the ancients, it's not only in the gurus, it's not only for the great minds. Every day we use this will too. We need to develop this willpower. Some people might say, no, we are not ambitious. We are not here to do spectacular things. But in everyday's life also, sometimes tragedies happen because of our own prarabdha. Those tragedies, they shake us to our roots. And after that tragedy, we are never the same persons again. But if we know how to take these tragedies creatively, we are largely transformed. Because otherwise, we are crushed. The tragedies could be at the physical level, at the relationship level, financial level. Sometimes we don't even notice. Why don't we notice? Because we are giving too much power to the machines outside. So one way of keeping grip on life is thinking right. It's like a right thinking and deep thinking. If you want to cultivate this willpower at a higher level, whether we want to achieve something big or whether we want to get out of the tragedies. There could be small stumbling blocks. These days, we all admire free thinking, freedom. But free thinking is good, but the right thinking is better. When right thinking becomes deep thinking, it's excellent. So without cultivating the habit of introspection, it's impossible to keep track of all forces which are operative within us. And this willpower is one of the forces. Without knowing the nature of these forces, we cannot be their masters. Because if we are not the masters, what happens? We become the slaves. And we all know what chances have slaves to develop and exercise their willpower when that slavery is due to their own lower nature. How can such a person develop a character? How can a person without a character have willpower? So this is all connected actually, if you look at it. Our rishis, they have told us to study the scriptures. Then have some introspection on the scriptures too. Manana. Because introspection will reveal that there is a basic tragedy involved in our daily life, in which most of our big tragedies are rooted. So daily life, we got to look at it. Are we living a daily life properly or not? It's not only at the time of the special occasions, daily life. In Sanskrit, this basic tragedy is narrated. In fact, this is called a Pandava Gita. That's where it comes from. And Duryodhana is the one who's saying it. It goes like that. Janami dharam na cha na che me pravriti. Janananya dharmam na cha me nivriti. Pravriti and nivriti. He says, I know what is dharam. What is righteousness? What is good? But I have not the inclination to do it. I know what is unrighteous, adharam, what is evil, sin, but I cannot desist from doing it. So to walk on the path, first to know what is a good path. He says, I know it, what is good, what is not good. Duryodhana went to the same school where Yudhishthira did, same acharya. He knew the definitions, but he says, I cannot do it. That I cannot desist doing what is wrong. We got to look at it. Is that happening in our life? We know it is good to be polite, decent. We know we need to restrain our language. in our daily dealings at home, on the street, in business, in society. But in spite of ourselves, we use wrong language. And from that wrong language arise many dissensions, small and big, at home, in society, at the national affairs, in the international affairs also. So not only it happened 5,000 years ago, it's happening right now too. Very often we do not remember the power of words, their capacity to break or make, wound or heal. Because most often our will just fails. Our will fails us to carry all these principles into practice. We all know the power of the words. We know that if we use the wrong language, we will create a wound in somebody's heart, which cannot be healed that easily. Or we may anger people to such an extent that dire consequences may follow. And those consequences we'll have to reap them. And they are very bitter. We know that it's beneficial to live a moral life. Yet in spite of ourselves, we commit sinful acts. And having committed them, we have to take their painful consequences. We can give away our entire property, but there's no way of giving away the fruits of our karmas. Remember that. We shall have to enjoy or suffer them ourselves. We know it's good to live according to the commandments of religion and obey the precepts of the Guru. We know it's good to get up early in the morning and do our sadhana. But how often in the morning when the alarm clock dutifully rings, we feel annoyed and we silence it. That's a lack of will. It's almost a crime for a sadhaka. When we pull a blanket over our nose and we think maybe another 10 minutes. Then what happens later on when we get up? We feel guilty. We worry all day long. So we may observe even in little things how little of what we know to be good for us, to be beneficial for us, we are able to put into practice. On the contrary, we continue to do harmful things. So we know it's not good to neglect our studies, our swadhyaya, but somehow we cannot turn our ears or eyes away from the TVs or the phones or the computers, or these days even the get-togethers. If our mind timidly protests, we just give it a thrashing. How can I miss such an exciting thing? How can I hurt somebody's feelings if they invited me and I cannot go? I don't want to listen to the blah, blah, blah of the gurus. That's what our mind says. And the consequences of it are too obvious in the ever-growing restlessness and dissatisfaction. We can see that directly. Do not people very well know that it's not good to drink alcohol? But people think that they cannot have celebrations without it. They promise not to drink, only to break the promise again. Ultimately, they even fail to promise. I believe it was Will Rogers who said, well, it is quite easy to give up smoking. I have done it 100 times. But still, at the same time, there is a record number of people who have controlled themselves. Where did they get the willpower to walk on the right path, to stay away from the poisons for this body and mind? It is well known that some of us can resist everything except temptations. There is a great fascination in the prohibited, great attraction in the destructive, great pull in the bizarre, and the wicked things in this world of Maya. So that's why we have to work on the willpower. Because if we keep on living a life in a hurry, and then keep on repeating what we have been doing, we will weep in the darkness of our own making. Now, why do we behave this way knowingly? As a sadhak, we got to think about it. Because what Duryodhana said, there's a little Duryodhana in all of us. That we know what is good, but still we don't do it. And we know something is wrong, and we still end up doing it. We do wrong things unknowingly too. But that apart, why do we do wrong things and fail to do right things knowingly? Contemplate on that. We must not commit the mistake of thinking that we do such things because we are essentially wicked or because of some kind of original sin. That kind of a justification does not take us far. Or I often hear from people, to arrest a human. No. No one in this world is essentially wicked. Remember that. Those are our Vedic seers' utterings. No one. Essentially, everyone is divine. Because the essence of every being is Atma, which is divine. The apparent wickedness of any person is only a fortuity. That means just an outer mask. The essence is not wicked. Essence is divine. That's why we got to get rid of that outer mask to reveal the real nature. We got to remember that no cow tells a lie. A tree does not steal or rob. A stone slab does not commit burglary. Only human beings do this. But a cow, as far as we know, cannot think of God. A tree cannot practice spiritual disciplines, sadhana. A stone slab cannot realize God. Only human being can. So the conclusion over here is that the basic daily tragedies of our lives are not rooted in the deep essence of us, but they are only because of the failure of us using the willpower. Many of us have no idea how much of goodness, strength, and greatness cry within us for self-manifestation. We want to be good. We want to help others. We want to walk on the path of sadhana. We have merely known only the weaker side of ourselves. And the weaker side, if you look at it, it does not belong to the Atma, the real us. It only belongs to the non-self, anatma, according to the Vedic rishis. It is the basic tragedy of our daily life that effectively prevents a real encounter with our true self. That's why it's very important for every person to know how to avoid the failure of a will. The only way to do is to cultivate the willpower. Continuation of today's talk. I will go through certain steps next Wednesday, that how to generate willpower in our system. Because if it's so important, how to really do it. So let's stop our class over here today with this Shanti part. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnase Purnamadaya Purnameva Vishishyate. Om Shanti 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 Om. Thank you very much.